Welcome back to the Physique Development Podcast, where we help you take the guesswork out of training, nutrition, and building a body you're proud of. I'm Sue, one of the coaches here at Physique Development, and today Alex and I are breaking down a question we get all the time. Why am I not building muscle even though I'm lifting? If you've been consistent in the gym, following a program, maybe even tracking your food, but you're still not seeing your body change the way you expected, this episode is for you. We're going to talk about the common reasons progress stalls, what actually drives muscle growth, and how to finally start seeing the results you've been working so hard for. We see this all the time with clients who come to us already lifting 5 to 6 days a week, tracking their macros, but not seeing change. Once we tweak how they train and recover, everything shifts. Let's get into it.
Reason number one, you're training to check a box. You are not applying enough intensity to your training to get the result of truly seeing muscle growth.
I love how you phrase that of to check a box, because there are so many people probably listening to this that are in a place where they're like, I've been putting in work. I've been going to the gym. I've been doing these things. But I think it's a great time to really reflect and see, what is your intention when you are there? Are you really looking at this as a goal? Or are you just going to the gym to say, I went to the gym. Where are my results now? And
intensity is really tough to gauge, especially if you started training when you were just by yourself. Like you didn't have a sport that you had a coach guiding you through the training when you were in high school or in college, and you got into resistance training as an adult and you are trying to figure out what that intensity looks like. You may have examples around you in the gym of maybe chaotic intensity and being loud and obnoxious, but you may not have strong examples for yourself of where that intensity really should be.
And you might even be thinking, I'm training hard. But I think a big difference for just talking about me personally was recognizing how to really gauge what hard is. Because there's still times to this day where I'm like, oh, that was a hard set. But when I really think about it, of okay, how close was I actually to failure? How many reps in reserve did I have? What was my RPE? Sometimes even if it was a hard set, it'll be a 6 or 7 RPE. And I think that's where people get a little bit lost, is like, oh, this felt hard for me, but maybe you still weren't challenging yourself the way that you needed to truly see that muscle growth.
And so let's quickly define the RPE and the RIR that you quickly referenced there. With RPE, this is rate of perceived exertion. And no matter how many repetitions you're performing, when you get up from that set, you ask yourself, how many repetitions could you have done past what you did? And if that number, let's say, is 3, then you're going to take that number and subtract it from 10, and then that will give you a RPE of 7. That is the intensity that you brought to that given set. And when we look at RIR, which is reps in reserve, this is just going to be looking at it in the inverse way, where when you say you have 3 repetitions left to reach failure, you have a 3 RIR. And that is going to be a strong marker or way that you can self-assess your intensity per set or per session, but you have to have a strong understanding of what failure truly feels and looks like for you within those given exercises to be able to adequately score your RIR or RPE.
I know you have a hack for this for people that are used to training alone and haven't had maybe that sport environment to really push themselves. So what is a great way for someone to safely figure out what failure is when they're training alone?
I like to utilize the leg extension to assess that set of failure. And so how I have clients do this is that they will get warmed up for a strong set of the leg extension, and they pick a weight that they think they will fail at 8 repetitions. And they go in and give themselves adequate amount of rest before they do this set, maybe 1, 2, 3 minutes prior to doing it. They're fresh. They're ready to give their all intensity. You pick your favorite song to hit a PR to and crank that up in your headphones. And then you go into that set with the intention that you're going to do as many reps as possible until you can no longer lift that leg pad or do another rep. You're going to absolute failure. And I like this because it's a controlled environment, because if we tried to do this with a barbell back squat, this could be a strong issue for a injury or just being a scene at the gym for sure. Doing it in the leg extension is a much more controlled environment, and you have a good assessment where you've got things that give you stability and you're able to really push. And I've had clients who go in thinking that they're going to do a set of 8 and they do 15 or 16 repetitions, and it's a really eye-opening, glass ceiling shattering type experience for them to really understand that they have a lot more intensity to give within their training. And from that point on, they're able to really see much greater results because they have a better gauge of what that RIR or RPE scoring really looks like. Because prior to doing that test, they were in a spot where it's like, okay, I think I'm at a 7 or an 8, which is typically for a RPE at 7 or 8 is a good marker for us to have the adequate intensity to see the muscle growth and adaptations that are needed to achieve mechanical tension. That's what we've seen through research. And so they thought that that's what the case was. And I can see it through video that that's not being achieved, but they have to experience it for themselves. And doing that test on the leg extension is a really good example.
And you mentioned it as well. Another great way is to take videos, because there's time where I'm taking videos and it feels hard again in the set. And I watch the video and I see how I wasn't actually struggling with the weight whatsoever. So when you're looking at a video, if you start to see form breakdown or you start to see you're doing partial reps, like that would be a sign of like, okay, this is getting to that RPE that I'm getting closer to failure. But if you're in there and you're looking like a spry chicken and you're like going through the reps super easy, then that is a great feedback to you of, oh, I can probably lift more. This is also something within coaching that we help clients with, not only reviewing their videos, but really being able to explain what it looks like and what that looks like within different types of training. Because I think that a lot of times when people go into training, they don't know exactly what the intention is, what they're trying to get. So they just kind of have this thought of like, I should try to do more, or I should try to sweat, or I should get really tired from it. But having a coach really gives you that guidance. So when you go into the gym, you're not wasting that time, because most of us don't have that time to waste, and especially don't have time to spend like years and years feeling like you're working really hard and then not gaining muscle, which we've seen before. People come to us, they have been training for 7 years, putting in effort, and they're like, I don't really feel like I've grown muscle. We're like, looking at pictures, you haven't, but let's change that and make sure that you're all set up so that you can gain muscle. Low reps is best.
High reps is best.
Fruit is so
It's
good.
terrible for you.
You should lift heavy.
High reps,
Carbs
low
are
weight.
needed.
Keto
Squats
for
are
life.
bad for your
Squats
knees.
are great
You
for your
should squat ass
knees
to
over
grass.
toes.
It's fine. It fits my
Macros is
macros.
for idiots.
When there are so many mixed messages going around, it's hard to know what you should even do or focus on. But that's exactly where physique development one-on-one coaching comes in. You might have heard of online coaching or even hired a coach before, but we believe in teaching you the why behind what we do while truly taking your life into consideration. We want to train, educate, and empower you to reach your goals and help you to stop spinning your wheels and just finally feel good. And hey, we're here to help you look good too. You need you. Your health is your wealth. So join Physique Development and let us be the last coach you ever need. Which that leads us into reason 2, which is you're not progressing, or more so, you're not progressively overloading. And when we look at what progressive overload actually means, it's not just adding weight. Weight is part of it, of being able to continuously challenge yourself, add more weight on the bar, but there's also the aspect of progressing through the volume that you're doing, the tempo that you're being able to do, the form that you have, or the intensity that you're taking to that exercise or to that session. There's a lot of different ways to progress, and I think that it's very important to recognize it's not just adding weight, while it can be, because I will count it as a huge win for progressive overload if I'm able to do the same reps, but maybe I have much better form, much better like mind-muscle connection, and I was able to keep the tempo as I was going through it.
I think additions or things to keep in mind is that if you are, we talk about the RPE and the RIR, if you are able to do the same weight the next week, but then last week you scored it an 8 RPE and then you're able to score it the next week a 7 RPE, that is progressive overload in the same sense as adding weight, because you are getting more efficient with lifting that weight. And the same thing would go if you were to add a set where, let's say that you do 3 sets in week 1, and then you do 4 sets in the week after that. Even if you use the same weight in that week, that's still a progressive, or between those weeks, you're still progressively overloading with the added volume of the increase in sets. And so there's a lot of small points that we want to make note of that are going to also indicate progressive overload, because early on in your lifting career, being able to go up in weight week after week, or as you learn a new way of training or a new way of performing exercises, you may see more consistent progress within the weight being selected. But as you get to be more experienced, as I'm sure many of you listening can relate to, you're not going to be able to add weight that consecutively, especially at the same or similar rep ranges. And so you've got to be able to pinpoint these small details. And this even comes back to the videoing, where by taking the videos, you can find small details within the form, within the intensity that you probably would not have made note of if you just performed the exercise and were taking mental notes from it. So not only do you have the benefit of what you're experiencing through your mind, but then also what you're experiencing from the video, and those things together really give you an opportunity to have as many data points of progressive overload that you can document and allow for you to keep making progress. Because when we're just going off of what's going on in our mind and not doing a great job within having a logbook and taking video, it's very easy for us to just program hop and be in a spot where we just want to keep jumping to the next flashy thing that's exciting that this friend is doing, or this person that you follow is doing. And then you find yourself in a spot where you're making that initial progress that every training phase allows for you to have, because it's the new stimulus. You're sore, you're making quicker progress because it's new. And then as soon as that newness wears off, it's like, okay, where's the next thing? And then you spend a whole year and maybe even longer than that in a spot where you don't make much progress at all. And then you're beating your head against the wall of like, wow, I could have been doing a lot more than what I did.
And I really want to emphasize, because you had said it a few times or alluded to it before you actually said having a logbook, but you made note of like taking notes, recording things. And especially with the example you gave of like, okay, last week it was at an 8 RPE, but this week it was at a 7. If you don't write that down, you're frankly not going to remember it. And I see far too many people going around the gym, not even writing down what they lifted or what weight they did lift. And then they just try to guess the next time that they're in the gym. Not only does that take a lot of mental effort and ends up with a lot of mental fatigue trying to remember everything, which again, you're just not going to remember everything with everything else going in your life, but they're going to be small changes that add up to really big results. And I think people get lost in that of like, oh, it was a 7 or an 8. I don't remember. They didn't make note of it. Then the next week they're like, well, I'm not making any progress. But you can't really make progress unless you measure that progress and track that progress. And you can't measure progress if the test changes every week as well, within program hopping and all of that kind of jazz. And so I would highly, highly recommend going through your logbook, and I write down what I lifted, and then I write down what the RPE was, and then I'll make notes at the bottom of the page of next week start at this weight, or next week you should be able to get to this weight. Or even if I had a spot for it of like, okay, they spotted me this much, but this time I had like a little bit less spot, or I was able to get one more rep before they spotted me, because those are all progressions that again might seem small or minuscule in the moment, but that's what leads to the huge changes and the huge results down the line. And you need to get not more granular, but you just need to take note of what you're doing to understand how you can continue to improve.
And this reminds me of one of my clients. Her name is Megan, and she had multiple coaches prior to working with us. And at the time, with the coaching that she had prior, she had felt like she had hit a plateau within her training, didn't feel like she was adding very much muscle, didn't feel like she was adding very much strength. And I was able to review her training and be able to pinpoint and explain why the training at the time was not fulfilling her needs of growing within hypertrophy, but also within strength. And we needed to track more metrics around the training on a week-to-week basis, as well as improving the structure. And she's right now coming around on 5 weeks of our program design. And within that, she has made strength progressions week after week. And this is coming down to her having a better understanding of exactly the intensity that she's needed set after set, and then also better structure to the training, which we're going to get into in here in just a moment, as we dig into reason number 3 of your exercise selection not matching the goals that you have in place.
When it comes to exercise selection, there's a bunch of different subcategories that we can and will get into. And one of the things that I see the most, especially if I'm seeing people post workouts on Instagram or even clients coming to us and sending the workouts, is going to be repetitive movement patterns time and time again. And this is something where I wouldn't expect someone who this isn't their job to know all of these things, but that's where having a coach can come in handy of you're not having to guess or wonder is this what I'm supposed to be doing? But what we mean by these repetitive movement patterns or patterns that you do or repetitive exercises is that there are exercises that work muscles in the same way. And so we often see someone doing 2 of those exercises in a session. And that is just time that can kind of feel wasted and be wasted in the long run because we didn't need more emphasis on that because you just did a movement that covers that muscle or that lengthening of the muscle or that movement pattern, whatever it may be. And so really being able to be more efficient within your workout instead of just putting in a lot of exercises because you saw the exercise or you thought you really like how this exercise feels without really understanding why you're doing it or how it fits into the totality of the workout can really just be shooting yourself in your foot when you feel like, oh, I'm doing this and it feels really hard, or I like the challenge of this and this makes me really sweaty and tired, where it's like, hey, you're actually just doing the same movement multiple times and not getting more bang for your buck.
Yeah, we can look at the example of a lot of different influencers or coaches that tout themselves online. They will just categorize exercises as this works this muscle, thus I'm doing a glute workout and I'm going to do all of these exercises on this given day because they train glutes. And there's going to be functionality that we can target within training the glutes that we want to challenge through the exercise. And if, for example, if we are wanting to challenge the squat pattern, for example, and challenge the glutes, if we were to do a barbell back squat and then a leg press and then a lunge, all in the same session, this would be very redundant in terms of how the glute is being targeted. Whereas if we have 3 exercises that are targeting the glutes in a given session, maybe we keep that leg press and then maybe we do something that's more abduction based, that we're doing like a glute med kickback. And then the third exercise could be a RDL or hinge variation where we have more versatility to how we're targeting the glutes and getting more bang for our buck in the work that we're accomplishing during that window of time, and not just beating a dead horse by doing the same movement pattern 3 separate times, which really leads us into the other component that kind of plays the same or similar role is going to be junk volume, where I'm sure that you all have heard this all across the internet, where within junk volume, this is just going to be unnecessary training or sets, exercises that you're performing that are not giving you more benefit to the goal that you're working towards. And that can be exercise redundancy, or it can just simply be that the same topic of, hey, I'm training glutes, so I'm going to do these 8, 9, or 10 exercises. We really want to emphasize the quality of the movement patterns as well as your time. If you're going in for a training session that is 8, 9, 10 exercises and you've got to be there for 2 hours, and there's certainly some overlap in the exercises that are being performed. And I'm sure that if any of you have done training sessions like that, there's a point where you're just like feeling more and more inflamed. You're not getting more benefit. Your brain is kind of going off into la la land, and then you're not getting the same intensity or the same effort. You're just like, can this please get over sooner rather than later? And that's just not going to be conducive to your overall goal. So not only are you wasting your time, but you're probably regressing towards the goal of building muscle and having the adequate intensity to your training.
Yeah, and junk volume I really look at is just like you're throwing the kitchen sink at it. You don't know exactly what to do, so you're like, I'll just do more and do as much of what I see and hope that it works. And so being able to really look at this of I want to be more efficient and get more out of it instead of just I'm doing more for the sake of being more. Another one in the same vein is going to be choosing exercises that just look cool instead of build the target muscle. Because we also find that a lot of times, like Alex mentioned, of just people saying like, this is a glute movement. Sometimes people don't know what an exercise is actually working and they see it and they're like, oh, this seems really cool. This seems new. This seems exciting. I don't even know if it's going to be doing what I need it to be doing. And so really being able to have someone that understands anatomy is going to help you build your target muscles the way that you need to and explain that to you, because there are a lot of exercises that I see where I'm kind of like, or I see a lot of when girls are like, if you're tired of doing this exercise, do this. And it just like looks kind of outlandish, but it's like, well, I haven't seen growth the way that I'm doing it, so I might as well try this with no rhyme or reason. That's where we want to be able to understand that a little bit further instead of all of a sudden you're upside down in the Smith machine and you're like, how'd I get here?
Are you sick and tired of your glutes not growing? Turning around in the mirror and seeing a board for a booty? I've been coaching for nearly a decade, helping thousands of women reach their goals. The most common goal? Grow my glutes. Women in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and even 60s able to grow their glutes with the guidance of my training programs. And for all this time, I've kept my best glute growth secrets only for my one-on-one clients. And that changes today. We just released our 12-week glute growth program in the PD training app. It is a 4-day program with exercise and volume adjustments every 3 weeks. You can easily access the program through our app and track every single workout. Each exercise will have a detailed video teaching you exactly how to perform each and every movement. And guess what? I am no longer gatekeeping. I'm sharing every single one of my best glute growth secrets inside this program because you are awesome and I want you to have this program. I'm going to give you $25 off, making it a fraction of what you spent at Starbucks this past month. Use code POD. The link to purchase will be in the description. Now let's get back to the show. The fourth reason you're not seeing the muscle growth that you desire to see is probably that you're under eating for the goals that you have in place. And when we talk about under eating or having the adequate resources from a nutritional standpoint to see the muscle growth, it does not have to be what is often touted or thought of when it comes to being in a bulk or a surplus. Because when I think of bulk or surplus, I think of someone really fat, honestly. I think of stuffing your face, being uncomfortable, having to unbutton your pants after you eat because you simply cannot even fathom keeping them at the size they are at that moment. And this is a thought that goes through a lot of other people's mind too, to where you're trying to have the leanest progress humanly possible. And that unfortunately is leading you to a place where you're under eating. And so then you're constantly sore and feeling like trash as you are trying to go through this build and not actually seeing adequate results or desired results because of the lack of fuel. And so what is really needed, and we're going to talk about this actually in the next episode, so stay tuned for that when that rolls around, but the surplus needed can be as little as 5% above your calorie maintenance. And that is not going to elicit the same mental or the visual that my mind is producing when I think about the bulk or the surplus and the just stuffing your face, because that 5 to 10% above your maintenance is going to be a much smaller number than what you think. And when I think of the like under eating and under fueling here, we need to make sure that you're still tracking, because this is not going to be as glamorous as the fat loss phases that you have done, and it's going to be longer than the fat loss phases that you have done. And so there's going to be components in which that are just very boring. If you want to talk about dieting being boring, try putting on muscle, because that is going to be far more boring and far more tedious, because we're looking at least double the amount of time that you spent on a fat loss phase to have noticeable results within seeing muscle growth. And so that is going to be a big marker to keep in mind.
And with him talking about 5% above maintenance, that requires you to first know what your maintenance calories are. And I think that that's what comes in of like people are either constantly dieting or they are tracking and then not tracking, having these big swings in intake. And it's kind of getting to this place of you end up putting on a little bit weight, you feel fluffy, and then you're like, no, I need to diet or I need to cut back on calories. And you're kind of just in this pendulum section of like you gain a little bit, you lose a little bit, you gain a little bit, you lose a little bit, and you're not not actually gaining muscle. So like Alex said, it does take time to build muscle and it can feel kind of boring for all intensive purposes, but it's also being able to recognize that if you are wanting muscle growth, like it is going to take time. There's not a shortcut around that, but I mean, rather take 6 to 9 to 12 months to actually build muscle than what I would assume some of you guys are doing of the past 2 to 3 years, even more. You've been oscillating between those same 5 to 10 pounds and not actually changing your physique.
Now that we've corrected your training intensity as well as improving your progressive overload and your exercise selection and making sure you've got adequate nutrients in place, you get those in the right spot and you are making some solid progress. But without this next one, it's still not going to be what you want. And the fifth reason is that you're not recovering enough to see the adaptation that you're desiring. And this is a tidbit where people think that the more frequent you press a button, the more benefit that you're going to get. And what I mean by button is train a given muscle group. And if you're trying to grow your glutes, training them 7 days a week is not going to be the answer, nor is it going to be 6. It's going to be somewhere between 1 and 3. And I honestly would say more of 2 to 3 sessions per week. And that is going to have to be very strategic of how you lay out those sessions in the time in between each of them, because we need to be able to approach each session from a recovered state from the session prior so that we can attack each given session with the correct intensity and focus needed so that we can continue to progressively overload session after session. And so if we are setting up for 2 glute focus workouts per week, it could be a Monday and a Thursday or a Tuesday and a Friday where we have roughly 48 to 72 hours in between each of those sessions to where we should see you get back to 100% recovery going into that next session where you're training that same muscle group. If you are doing 3 sessions, now we're running into a little bit more of a challenge and you have to be very creative within the exercise selection and the volume that you are completing on a session by session basis. And so we have to be very thoughtful to the program design. And that's where we really come in here to pick the correct exercises as well as the amount of sets and the intensity that you apply to each of those sets to have the adequate frequency to see the hypertrophy or muscle growth that you're desiring. And what we do here at Physique Development is that we teach that those methods throughout the time of us working together so that when you are done working with physique development, then you're able to continue to apply those in your own training past that time and continue to see that growth. And so it's a massive part of our coaching and a massive part of you getting to see the muscle growth that you want. But the recovery part is where you're actually going to see that growth. And it is really tough to make sure that you have all the adequate pieces in place.
Because a big part of that is that muscle growth happens outside of the gym. Something I like to remind myself of is I want to train hard and then recover even harder. Because I see far too often people training hard or being in the gym and then their sleep is trash. They're not eating enough. They are in a place where they have too much stress and they're not being able to actually recover from all of that. So then they're in a place where they're not seeing results. They start to get into a spot where they have higher cortisol and then they have inflammation. That's making them not have results. So then they just want to try harder and they think that taking days off is what's going to regress them. And then that's when you start to have plateaus, you have irritability, you can't even have like a decreased libido, not being able to get pumps when you're at the gym. All of those are going to be real life signs of poor recovery. Your sleep can also be affected even further. And so people get into that place where they have those signs, but they're so afraid to take a break because they think that they just need to do more. And so a really helpful thing for me when it comes to like work and in the gym is that quality time off leads to quality time on. So even with us talking about intensity, this kind of circles back to us. To have enough intensity, you have to be recovered enough. And if you drive yourself into the ground with volume and you are never taking time to actually recover, then you're going to be in that place where you're not going to be able to have that intensity and you're going to feel burnout, you're going to feel plateaued, and you're going to feel like muscle feels impossible for you and there's no way to get there without feeling like crap. Going into the last reason that we have here as far as why you're not building muscle even though you lift, we've hinted at it a few different times, but you don't have a long enough time horizon. Because the reality is muscle growth takes time. And a lot of times when people say they're plateaued, they're not actually plateaued. You're just impatient. Because what I really look for is going to be 6 months of visible change depending on how you're addressing it. You can spend 6 months and see no change, but if you're actually putting the effort in, the intention in, you're doing the other things that we've talked about in this episode, being able to allow yourself a minimum of 6 months to actually see those results is what we're looking for here.
And within those 6 months, you're going to be able to have assessments within your check-ins if you're working with physique development where you are seeing improvements maybe in digestion, improvements in food selection, improvements in your sleep. We want to have the focus be on the entire picture relative to just seeing photo progress, because in a build, it's something that we need to have other goals also running alongside of it, because it is going to be a time-consuming process, and that's just the reality of it.
And because it does take a longer time horizon, it really does help to have those checkpoints throughout the way. It helps to know like where you're going to. So it's not just like month 1, this is where I'm at. Month 6, did I get to my goal? That allows for space to make improvements, to make changes, and to ensure you're on the right path to truly see that muscle growth overall happen. So to wrap all of that up and to let you know why you're not building muscle even though you lift, or you've been the person that says time and time again, I just want to look like I lift, we want to make sure that you are training with intensity, not just going into the gym to check it off of your list. Being able to actually progress while you're in the gym, and that looks very different than just adding weight to the bar. Being able to make sure you're choosing the right exercises, not only for the specific muscles you want to improve for your body, but also for the ones that are going to be the most efficient route to your goals. We also want to make sure that you are fueling recovery properly, because remember, you want to train hard, recover harder, and muscle growth actually happens outside of the gym. And we want to ensure that you are consistent long enough to be able to make those adaptations to the muscle.
And if you're not sure which of these is holding you back, that is literally what we help our clients identify and fix every single week. We take the guesswork completely out of it so that your efforts actually pay off and you see the results that you have longed for so long. You don't need a complete overhaul. You just need more clarity. And that's what our coaching gives you, the ability to stop guessing and start progressing. And you can find the link to apply for our coaching in the show notes. Make sure that you tune in next week, because the next topic for us is why a huge surplus isn't necessary. So taking these tools that we just went over and then being able to learn more about the surplus is going to be fantastic. Thank you for tuning in with us today. Please make sure that you are subscribed to the podcast. Leave us any comments or feedback in the show notes as well, and we'll see you in the next episode.